Hello everyone. So we are continuing the same lecture. Last class we discussed about structuralism. In structuralism we discussed Foucault's discourse, the idea of discourse, and then we were discussing post-structuralism, and now we are going to discuss postmodernism and its connection to cultural studies. So by discussing each main theory, we are trying to find out what is its connection or what is its effect on cultural studies, or what are the differences between cultural studies and each theory. So this is what we are doing in a nutshell. So let me talk about postmodernism here. I have given here a separate title for that session in the notes, how cultural studies is affected by post-structuralism and postmodernism. In that I talk about postmodernism, and also we talk about psychoanalysis and cultural studies. That is the next section actually, not in here. Anyway, let's talk about postmodernism. Now, one of the most significant influences of post-structuralism and postmodernism on cultural studies is its anti-essentialism. We already discussed what is essentialism and what is anti or anti-essentialism. You can say both ways. Post-structuralism doesn't believe in a stable meaning in anything. We talked about Derrida, so we already know that. Meaning is challenged, compared, and in constant battle to have essential self. This is about post-structuralism. Now, hence post-structuralism is anti-essential in nature. Now, what is about postmodernism? Postmodern culture is marked by a sense of the fragmentary, ambiguous, and uncertain quality of the world, along with high levels of personal and social reflexivity. Now, let me ask you this: what is the difference between modernism and postmodernism? You have plenty of YouTube lectures there in YouTube. You can click on any, you can just search by typing differences between modernism and postmodernism, or just type modernism and postmodernism. Plenty of UGC net tutors, they are giving these lectures there, and if that's not sufficient, or if you don't have time for long lectures, I can tell you in a very few sentences how this works and what is the differences between these two. So from 1910, during the First World War or post First World War, you have modernism, and then in 1945, after 1945, that means after Second World War, you have postmodernism. It's very easy to remember if you have the timestamps. So modernism, if I say in Malayalam, it's going to be very easy. This is how I remember the difference between these two. ഭ്രാന്തിനെ കുറിച്ച് സംസാരിക്കുക, അത് മോഡേണിസം എന്ന് പറയാം. ഭ്രാന്ത് സംസാരിക്കുക എന്നത് പോസ്റ്റ് മോഡേണിസം എന്ന് പറയാം. Now, yeah, I know this is going to be very short, this explanation. Let me use some formal words and explain this. See, modernism, it was obsessed with the fragmentary world. It was lamenting over the orderless, the chaotic world, and it tried to look for solutions everywhere. It's like you look at something that is broken, far away, you look at that broken structure and you lament on that chaos. You cry over it and you are sympathetic, but you look for solutions, you suggest a few solutions, but nothing seems to work, and you are addressing it. But postmodernism is celebrating the chaos. ഒരു ചെളിക്കുണ്ടിൻ്റെ വക്കത്തിരുന്ന് ആ ചെളിക്കുണ്ടിലേക്ക് നോക്കി അതിൽ നിന്ന് വരുന്ന ദുർഗന്ധമോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിനകത്തുള്ള വൃത്തികേടുകളോ ഒക്കെ നോക്കി, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇതെങ്ങനെ വൃത്തിയാക്കാം, ഇത് ഏതൊക്കെ തരത്തിൽ നമുക്ക് മണ്ണിട്ട് മൂടാവോ, അതോ കല്ല് പെറുക്കി ഇട്ടാൽ മതിയോ, നികന്ന് ഒരു റോഡിലാണെങ്കിൽ അങ്ങനെ മതിയോ, ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ ചിന്തിക്കാൻ, അതാണെങ്കിൽ അത് അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയാണ് നമ്മളുടെ കോൺവെർസേഷൻ പോകുന്നതെങ്കിൽ, നമ്മുടെ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ സംസാരിക്കുന്നതെങ്കിൽ അത് മോഡേണിസമാണ്. മറിച്ച് ഈ ചെളിക്കുണ്ടിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ ഇറങ്ങി ആ ചെളിയെല്ലാം വാരി എറിഞ്ഞ് അങ്ങോട്ടും ഇങ്ങോട്ടും എന്താ പറയുക, അതിൽ കിടന്ന് അറമാദിക്കുന്ന ഒരവസ്ഥയാണ് ചുരുക്കത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞാൽ പോസ്റ്റ് മോഡേണിസം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഈ ഒരു കോൺസെപ്റ്റ് നിങ്ങൾ എപ്പോഴും മനസ്സിൽ ഓർത്തിരിക്കുക. മറ്റ് ഫോമലായിട്ടുള്ള ഭയങ്കര ഹെവി ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഫോമൽ സെൻറ്റൻസുകളിലൊക്കെ നിങ്ങൾ എക്സാമിന് എഴുതി വയ്ക്കാം, പക്ഷേ നിങ്ങളുടെ ബ്രെയിനിനുള്ളിൽ ഇത്ര സിമ്പിളായിട്ടുള്ളൊരു എക്സ്പ്ലനേഷൻ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ next time when you read about these two, you'll have a much more better understanding about these things. So yes, So let's talk about postmodernism, and the only connection postmodernism and cultural studies or post-structuralism, whatever with the post, both are anti-essential, and you should know that cultural studies is also anti-essential. So it has a similarity with the cultural studies. And discussing postmodernism, the main books that are coming or main works, on the top of my head some basic essays are there. Anyway, I don't think I should discuss it because Chris Barker doesn't talk about much about these essays or anything. You have Jean Baudrillard. Actually, the right pronunciation of Baudrillard is a bit different. But anyway, Jean Baudrillard's book, The Gulf War Didn't Happen, that work is coming on top of my head. Then postmodernism, yes, it talks about hyper reality, talks about everything and anything that doesn't exist in reality, but we accept that unreality. Clockwork Orange, the novel I was talking about in the post Second World War Britain at that time, that novel also celebrated this chaotic world. You can see a lot of violence in that novel. There is a chaotic world. There is no order, there is no hierarchy, just people are just going there, breaking in houses, raping women, killing and torturing others. So this novel celebrates that chaos. So this is a postmodern era novel I'm talking about. So yeah, these are some of the examples. You can Google it and you can read more about it, and always you can read Habib. So the next, we will move on now to the other theories and its connection with the cultural studies. The next theory is psychoanalysis and its connection to cultural studies. Now let me read this first and I'll explain that. Psychoanalysis finds self as a fractured entity. We'll come to that. It searches the reasons behind subject formation. So psychoanalysis, in a nutshell, psychoanalysis, when it analyzed human psychology or human self, it understood that it is not an organic unity, just from the moment you were born, and with gradual development it became bigger as an adult psychology or adult psyche or self. No, psychoanalysis finds out or claims that our self is a unity of so many fractured elements. And we talked about unconscious also earlier when we were studying this theory, how unconscious is having this power over the conscious mind. Everything we talked about, we already know some of the Freudian theories and id, ego, superego. These are also fractures, right? You have three sections: id, ego and superego, and you know what these three things are. It's from the degree days we already know these things. So it is not a unity, right? It is actually separate sections, and it is all in your brain, inside your head, and self is a fractured entity. So that is what psychoanalysis says. The self constitutes of id, ego and superego. In classical Freudian thought, Oedipus complex. Now this is a very popular term, Oedipus complex. We all know that boys, they have this obsession with their mother, and they have this castration fear, and from the moment they have castration fear, they start to identify themselves with the father, and they try to be like the father, the boys I'm talking about. For girls it's a bit different. For them this penis envy is there, because they have the same, maybe a little bit less obsession with the mother, but they realize that I don't have a phallus, so there is this envy called penis envy. And they try to be like father, but they know that they can never be like father because of the lack of phallus, and in that finally the only solution they find is to have a child with their father, but that's not possible. And so as in this attempt to have this power over phallus, a power of having phallus, they try to have a child with other man, a man who represents this father figure or this phallic figure. So basically this is what we know about this Oedipal complex, Oedipus, these terms. So yes, the castration fear makes boys shift their obsession with the mothers. We already talked about that. And yes, let me see. Cultural studies find psychoanalysis unacceptable. So that's what you should know. Psychoanalysis, we already know something, basic things you can talk if they ask you in the exam. And then see, we are talking about cultural studies and its connection to all these theories, right? What is cultural studies, or what has cultural studies got to say about psychoanalysis? Cultural studies does not approve psychoanalysis at all, because it is patriarchal. It is patriarchal, and see, unacceptable because it is basically phallocentric and it is patriarchal. We will understand more about this when we study feminism, because why patriarchy and cultural studies, they never get along. In short, I can say this: feminism is something that keeps moving, that something that is about this gender, this female gender, and several types of feminisms are there. But basically this is about how this marginalized people, and how because cultural studies, it has got this special affection towards the marginalized. So here with feminism, cultural studies, definitely it gets along, because it is about, see, a woman is always moving, she goes through a lot of change, and masculinity is considered as stable. Femininity is not stable, it's unstable, because it goes through a lot of changes. If you look at a female body also, it goes through a lot of changes with reproduction and other things in life also. The identity a woman with which she identifies, that also keeps changing. So feminism is all about or accepting or embracing this change, or addressing the issues you face when you go through this change. So cultural studies, it really likes feminism. We'll talk about that when you talk about feminism, but anyway, you should know this, that cultural studies does not approve psychoanalysis because of two things. One, it is phallocentric. Two, it is patriarchal. So that's all. Now we can talk about feminism, and then you will understand why. Feminism says that sex is the axis where the power in this society, it rotates, it is an axis. Power is always related to gender. You are masculine or you are a male, automatically there is some power. Now female or femininity, it doesn't have that power. So feminism finds sex is the axis of social organization. Gender relations are related to power, definitely. See, cultural studies, this is why I told you, when you talk about feminism, you'll understand. Cultural studies does not approve of those who have power. Oh, okay, cultural studies accept the fact that power has a creative potential. It is because somebody has power, you have a group of powerless people, that is all there. But gender relations are related to power, and feminism understands this power that men have. So that's why cultural studies, it approves feminism, but it does not approve patriarchy, it does not approve phallocentrism. And so because psychoanalysis is based on these two, cultural studies does not approve psychoanalysis. I hope that's clear. The subordination of women, we are discussing feminism again. Women is argued to be evident across a range of social institutions and practices. Post-structuralist feminism believes that gender is a social construct, the result of discursive practices. Thus, it is anti-essential in nature and hence gets along with the cultural studies. So basically, feminism is not phallocentric, feminism is not about patriarchy, but feminism is anti-essential in nature. Feminism believes that sex has got some power with the gender. So basically, cultural studies is really getting along with the feminism. The next theory is post-colonialism. Post-colonialism is a much wider theory and it is also one of the most discussed theory recently. And cultural studies is very much interested in post-colonialism, and it has everything positive towards post-colonialism. So some terms you should remember. Post-colonialism talks about race, and it says that race, it doesn't have any biological explanation or it has any cultural explanation, but it is something that exists outside its representation. Postcolonialism finds race as a social construction. Actually, it is not, it has no scientific explanation, but it is a social construct. So one calls a community, a particular race, not because they have any scientific backing, but has some it is a social construct, those who have a brownish shade, those who have black shade, those who have yellowish skin. So they have races like that. Now some terms that you have to remember in this session is, one is domination and subordination. It is a set, domination and subordination, easy to remember. See, the colonizer is the one who is doing the domination, and the subordination is experienced by the colonized. And the other term is hybridity or creolization, creolization. Hybridity is this: when colonialism happens, neither the colonizer's language or culture nor the colonized people's culture or language can be presented in its purest form. So basically you have a hybridity of both. Now this is very much clear when you talk about British Asians or Latino Americans and all this modern world. You can talk about the Commonwealth countries, especially, they have this hybridity sometimes. So this is what post-colonialism says in Chris Barker's essay. One, the discussion about race, then domination and subordination, and third term is hybridity or creolization. Barker only discusses these three terms, three sets of terms, and he doesn't say the connection cultural studies has with post-colonialism. But you must understand that cultural studies accepts the claims of post-colonialism. It accepts the fact that race, for example, anything in post-colonialism, it is a social construction. It doesn't have any foundations other than that. So cultural studies is very much interested to study about all these things. So we were talking about the main theories and its connection with the cultural studies. Now lastly, Chris Barker talks about epistemology. What is epistemology? If you just Google search epistemology, you can find out that epistemology is obsessed with knowledge formation. It discusses types of knowledge and how knowledge is formed. What can we how can we decide whether something is true or not? For example, the truths that we know. For example, let's say okay, sun rises in the east, it's a truth. I mean, yeah, it is a truth, but what is the evidence? Is the evidence is just because we see every time sun rises in the east, is that the evidence? What if the vision, our vision is a distorted vision? Are you sure that what you see is the actual fact? So it asks questions, it tries to find out whether it was somebody who came with the idea first, was it a powerful person, is it because of the person's power it became gradually true? It goes for the origin, and it searches the basis of something, and it also tries to look for the differences between facts and beliefs. So what is the truth or what is somebody's opinion? So well, I can say that history is often called as his story. So whatever we learn in the mainstream history books may not be the truth. There is another version of history by the people who were not obviously involved in a battle. What about the people who were not even aware of the world wars at that time? What about their version of the world? We discussed everything about modernism and postmodernism and how people celebrated chaos, all those things. Now what about, there were people who were not even aware that the world war was going on between these countries. What about those people? Did they celebrate chaos as well, or were they living peacefully and happy, having food 3 meals a day and happily living, getting married and having babies? So what is their version of world at that time, especially during the battle? Was it as chaotic as for the people who were involved in the battle? So, if we are talking about all these theories, if you look for the epistemological analysis, or if you look for the epistemology, epistemology is more focused on facts. It talks about truths, it talks about knowledge. It's a bit blurry subject to discuss here, and it's philosophy. You see, it's philosophy, and it requires a lot of your reading. So I want you to go and read if you want to know about epistemology. Anyway, Chris Barker mentions about epistemology, and what cultural studies has got a what is the problem of cultural studies with regard to epistemology. See, postmodernism and post-structuralism, they both believe that, see, emphasis is, or for these two theories, the emphasis is on the production of truths within the language games in which such truths are founded. I told you structuralism and post-structuralism, they have this obsession with the language, this technicality of the language, and their theory, those theories are based on language theories. And postmodernism also, it believes, yes, it believes in truths. Post-structuralism and postmodernism accept the legitimacy of a range of truth claims, discourse and representation of reality. This postmodern understanding of knowledge is on the ascendancy within cultural studies. See, cultural studies approves whatever post-structuralism or postmodernism talk about the reality. See, there, for example, postmodernism, it talks about reality by hyper reality. We discussed hyper reality, and all these animation cartoons, whatever this is, Tom and Jerry or Disney cartoons, see, those are not real, right? We don't see that in day-to-day lives. That exists only in a TV screen. When it appears on the screen, that is the reality, but we accept it as reality. So this is a truth in postmodernism. Is that true though? That's not true. But at the same time, it is true. Cartoons exist, animation movies exist. Yes, we know that they are not real, but they are real in their own existence, and it is true. But see, even though cultural studies, it approves whatever truths approved by postmodernism or post-structuralism, still there are critics in cultural studies. They believe that we need more certain basis of knowledge in cultural studies. We should not simply rely on postmodernism or post-structuralism and their way of understanding the truths, but we need more certain basis for analyzing the knowledge. So it's not, cultural studies is not simply satisfied with whatever is given or offered or shown, pointed out by these theories. Cultural studies needs, it requires its own foundation, its own method, its own analysis, its own methodology, according to a few critics or some of the critics in cultural studies. So that's it. We talked about major theories, we talked about philosophy and how cultural studies is viewed, or how cultural studies views these theories, everything. And from the next lecture, from the next part of this lecture, we will talk about some key methodologies in cultural studies, and that will be the end of this essay.